the salvage of broken dreams. The ventilation system of Rusthaven wheezed like a dying animal, pumping stale air through corridors that hadn't seen proper maintenance in decades. Zephyr Kane pulled his worn leather jacket tighter as he navigated the crowded market levels, the metallic tang of recycled oxygen mixing with the acrid smell of burned circuitry and unwashed bodies. This wasn't where he'd imagined his life would lead him, but exile had a way of narrowing one's options. The slave market occupied the station's lowest level, a deliberate choice that kept the unsavory business literally and figuratively beneath the notice of passing traders. Flickering plasma lights cast sickly shadows across rows of cages, their occupants representing every corner of the galaxy's forgotten peoples. Zephyr moved through the crowd with practiced indifference, though his stomach churned at the casual cruelty on display. He wasn't here by choice. His last archaeological expedition had yielded nothing but worthless rocks and mounting debts. The rare isotope scanner tucked under his arm would fetch enough credits to keep his ship running for another month, maybe 2 if he was careful. It was a small surrender in what felt like an endless series of defeats. Fresh stock from the outer rim, bellowed Grim, the station's most notorious flesh trader. His cybernetic eye glowed red as it scanned the gathered crowd. Exotic specimens, hard workers, and a few curiosities for the discerning collector. Zephyr tried to ignore the man's sales pitch, focusing instead on locating a reputable parts dealer. But something made him pause near the back of the auction space where the forgotten ones were kept. These were the slaves deemed unsellable, left to waste away until they died or someone took pity on them. She sat in the furthest cage, knees drawn to her chest, long hair cascading like liquid starlight around her shoulders. Her skin held an otherworldly blue-silver luminescence that seemed to pulse faintly with her heartbeat. But it was the markings on her exposed arms that made Zephyr's breath catch in his throat. Intricate symbols spiraled from her wrists to her shoulders. Not tattoos or brands, but something that seemed to flow beneath her skin like living light. He recognized the geometric patterns immediately. Had spent years studying fragments of similar markings carved into ancient stones scattered across dead worlds. Atlantean script. Impossible, but unmistakable. The Atlantean civilization was considered myth by most scholars, a romantic fairy tale about a race of beings who could manipulate sound and light as easily as breathing. Zephyr had risked his career arguing for their historical existence, presenting evidence that his colleagues dismissed as wishful thinking. His academic exile had begun with those theories, yet here sat living proof, forgotten and dying in a slave cage. The woman didn't look up when he approached. Her breathing was shallow, labored, and he could see infected wounds along her back where someone had tried to scrape away some of her markings. The other traders gave her cage a wide berth, muttering about bad luck and cursed cargo. "That one's been here for months," said a gruff voice behind him. Zephyr turned to find Grim watching him with calculating interest. "Can't sell her, can't kill her, she just endures. Makes the other merchandise nervous." "What's her story?" Zephyr asked, trying to keep his voice casual. Grim shrugged. "Found her drifting in a dead ship near the Veil Nebula. No records, no identification, doesn't speak any known language. My customers want slaves who understand orders, not living decorations that give them nightmares." The woman's head lifted slightly at the sound of their conversation. For just a moment her eyes met Zephyr's through the bars. They were the color of deep space, dark blue shot through with points of silver light like distant stars. In those eyes he saw not madness or defeat, but a profound weariness that resonated in his own soul. "She's dying," Zephyr observed. "Probably," Grim agreed. "Been refusing food for the past week. If you're interested, I'll let her go cheap. Call it a curiosity purchase." Zephyr's hand instinctively moved to the scanner under his arm, his last, valuable possession. The rational part of his mind screamed that this was madness. He had no money for charity cases, no room in his life for complications. His ship could barely support one person, let alone 2. But those markings. How much? He heard himself ask. Grim's cybernetic eye whirred as it focused on him. 500 credits. That's practically giving her away. It was exactly what Zephyr had hoped to get for his scanner. Every credit he had left in the galaxy, with nothing held back for emergencies. He looked at the woman again, saw the way her markings pulsed a little brighter when she sensed his attention. "Done," he said, pulling out his credit chip. The transaction, completed with a soft chime. The cage lock disengaged, its electromagnetic field flickering off with a sound like breaking glass. Zephyr stepped inside, moving slowly so as not to startle her. Up close, the damage was worse than he'd thought. Her beautiful skin was marred by countless small wounds, evidence of someone's repeated attempts to study or harvest her markings. She was painfully thin, malnourished to the point where her bones showed clearly beneath her luminescent flesh. "I'm Zephyr," he said softly, crouching down to her eye level. "I'm not going to hurt you." She stared at him for a long moment, those stellar eyes searching his face for something. Then, so quietly he almost missed it, she spoke a single word in a language that made his academic heart race with recognition. It was Atlanteran. He was certain of it. The word itself was beautiful. Syllables that seemed to resonate in his chest, like distant music. He didn't know what it meant, but the way she said it felt like a question or perhaps a prayer. "I'm going to help you," he said, beginning to shrug off his jacket. "Can you walk?" She tried to stand, her legs shaking with the effort. Zephyr caught her elbow gently, steadying her without being invasive. Her skin was warm to the touch, and he felt a subtle vibration through the contact like touching a tuning fork. "Easy," he murmured. "We'll take this slow." He draped his jacket around her shoulders, noting how it dwarfed her slight frame. She clutched at the fabric like it was a lifeline, the first kindness she'd received in who knew how long. Together they made their way through the market. The woman walked with surprising dignity, despite her weakness. Her head held high as curious. Stares followed them. Zephyr felt a protective anger building in his chest at the way people looked at her, like she was some exotic specimen rather than a living being. His ship, the Wanderer's Dream, was docked in the station's cheapest berth. It wasn't much to look at, a converted research vessel that had seen better decades, but it was home. More importantly, it was free. The woman's eyes widened as they entered the ship's main cabin. Her gaze moved over his collection of artifacts and research materials with something approaching wonder. She reached out tentatively to touch a fragment of crystalline sculpture, and the piece began to glow softly at her touch. Zephyr's breath caught. The crystal was Atlanteran, one of his few authentic pieces. It had never shown any kind of energy signature before. "You recognize this," he said, more statement than question. She nodded slowly, then spoke again in that musical language. "This time." The words came easier, as if his ship's academic atmosphere was helping her remember how to use her voice. "I wish I could understand you," Zephyr said. "But we'll figure it out. For now, let's get you cleaned up and fed." He led her to the ship's small medical bay, a cramped but well-equipped space that had served him well during his expedition days. She sat on the examination table without protest, watching him with those incredible eyes as he gathered supplies. "This might sting a little," he warned, approaching with an antiseptic pad. To his surprise, she caught his wrist gently before he could treat her wounds. When their skin made contact, he felt it again, that subtle vibration that seemed to resonate in his bones. But this time something else happened. For just a moment he caught a flash of something that wasn't quite memory, wasn't quite vision, a city of impossible beauty, built from living crystal and singing stone. Beings with luminescent skin moving through spaces that seemed to bend light and sound to their will. And at the center of it all, a vast tower that hummed with the collective voice of an entire civilization. The vision ended as quickly as it began, leaving Zephyr gasping and disoriented. The woman had released his wrist and was watching him with an expression of gentle concern. "What was that?" he whispered. She didn't answer, but her markings pulsed brighter for a moment, and he thought he saw something like hope kindle in her stellar eyes. As night cycle descended over the station, Zephyr found himself sitting across from his mysterious guest in the ship's small galley. She'd accepted a simple meal of protein broth and had even managed a few words in broken common, though she seemed more comfortable with her own musical language. "What's your name?" he asked gently. She considered this for a long moment, as if the concept of names was something she'd almost forgotten. When she finally spoke, it was in Atlantaran, a single word that seemed to contain entire symphonies. Awakening the ancient song 3 days had passed since leaving Rust Haven, and Nyx was beginning to remember what it felt like to be more than just surviving. The ship's steady hum seemed to resonate with something deep in her chest, a frequency that matched the rhythm of her own heartbeat. She'd taken to spending hours in the observation dome, watching stars wheel past in their ancient dance, her markings pulsing in harmony with the cosmic radiation that bathed the ship. Zephyr found her there each morning, sitting cross-legged on the floor with her eyes closed, lips moving silently as if in prayer or meditation. He'd learned not to interrupt these sessions, sensing they were part of some healing process he couldn't begin to understand. "The stars sing differently here," she said, without opening her eyes as he entered the dome that morning. Her common had improved dramatically over the past few days, though it still carried the musical cadence of her native tongue. "How so?" Zephyr asked, settling beside her with 2 cups of morning brew. Nyx accepted the cup gratefully, her fingers wrapping around its warmth. "In the core systems, their voices are muffled, choked by the noise of civilization. Out here, they remember their original songs." She opened her eyes, those stellar depths reflecting the nebula they were currently passing through. Her health had improved remarkably since leaving the station. The wounds were healing, her skin had regained some of its natural luminescence, and she'd begun to eat with something approaching appetite. "You speak of stars as if they're alive," Zephyr observed. A shadow crossed her features. "My people believed everything possessed a voice, a fundamental frequency that connected it to the cosmic symphony. Stones, stars, living beings, all part of one great song." She paused, her markings dimming slightly. "We called it the eternal resonance." "Past tense," Zephyr noted gently. Nyx nodded, her gaze returning to the stars. "I remember more each day. Fragments mostly. My name is Lyrelai, Princess Lyrelai of the Singing Towers. I was to be the next resonance keeper, trained from childhood to hear and guide the planetary song that held our civilization together." Zephyr set down his cup, leaning forward with the intensity of a scholar scenting a breakthrough. "What happened to Atlantara? The records I've found suggest your people simply vanished." Pain flickered across Lyrelai's features. "We didn't vanish. We were silenced." The words hung in the air between them, heavy with implication. Zephyr wanted to press for details, but something in her expression warned him that some memories were still too raw to touch. "The hegemony came to us as traders first," she continued after a long moment. "They were fascinated by our abilities, our technology that seemed like magic to them. They wanted to learn, to form partnerships." Her voice grew bitter. "We were naive enough to trust them." Before she could elaborate further, the ship's proximity alarms began chiming. Zephyr was on his feet instantly, his academic curiosity replaced by survival instincts honed by years of living on the galaxy's edge. "Echo report," he called to the ship's AI as they rushed toward the bridge. "3 vessels approaching on intercept course," came the synthetic response in a melodious voice that had always reminded Zephyr of wind chimes. "Configuration suggests bounty hunters. They're broadcasting a capture warrant." Zephyr's blood chilled. "For who?" The warrant identifies the target as Atlantaran specimen, designation NYX-7, property of Hegemony Research Division. Lyrelai had gone very still beside him, her markings beginning to pulse with angry light that cast sharp shadows across the bridge. "They found me." "How?" Zephyr demanded, hands flying over the navigation controls. The Wanderer's dream groaned as he pushed the engines beyond their recommended limits. "We've been running silent. No transmissions, no." "The markings," Lyrelai said quietly, her voice barely audible over the rising hum of overstressed systems. "They're not just ceremonial. They emit a specific resonance frequency that connects to the quantum field. With the right equipment, they can be tracked across star systems. The lead ship was close enough now for visual identification. Sleek, predatory, built for pursuit and capture rather than destruction. Its hull bore the crimson and gold insignia of corporate security, the kind of people who made problems disappear quietly and efficiently. "This is Captain Voss of the CSS Silencer," came a cold voice over the comm, each word clipped with military precision. "You are harboring stolen corporate property. Stand down immediately and prepare to be boarded." Zephyr killed the comm channel and turned to Lirelai. In the red glow of the emergency lighting, she looked ethereal and terrifying, like some ancient goddess of war. "I won't let them take you." She was standing now, her entire body beginning to glow with that otherworldly light. The air around her seemed to shimmer with barely contained energy. "You may not have a choice. They've been hunting me for 3 years. I was their prize specimen until I managed to escape during a facility transfer." "What did they want with you?" Her expression hardened, and for a moment he glimpsed the princess she had once been, raised to command and protect her people, to dissect my abilities, to learn how my people could manipulate sound and light, to weaponize the eternal resonance for the hegemony's wars. She looked at him with those stellar eyes, and he saw steel beneath the pain. "I won't be caged again. Zephyr, I'd rather die first." The first disruptor blast rocked the Wanderer's dream, sending them both stumbling. Warning klaxons wailed as systems began failing one by one. Zephyr fought to maintain course, but the research vessel was never designed for combat. They had minutes at most before the bounty hunters disabled their engines completely. "There might be another way," Lirelai said suddenly, her voice taking on strange harmonics that made the damaged systems around them hum in response. "But I'll need you to trust me completely. What do you have in mind?" Instead of answering, she moved to the ship's communication array with fluid grace, her hands dancing over controls that sparked and flickered under her touch. Her markings were blazing now, casting the bridge in ethereal blue-silver light that seemed to bend and flow like liquid starlight. "My people's abilities weren't just theoretical," she said, her voice layering with overtones that made reality itself seem to vibrate. "We could project our consciousness through sound, touch minds across vast distances, even influence the quantum fields that bind matter together." Another blast, closer this time. The ship's hull groaned under the stress, and Zephyr could smell the acrid smoke of burning circuits. "The technique is dangerous," Lirelai continued, her hands working with desperate precision to reroute power through the damaged systems. "I haven't attempted it since my capture, and using it at this scale, it could burn out my neural pathways permanently. But if I can synchronize with your ship's systems, amplify my voice through your communication." "Array!" "Do it," Zephyr said without hesitation, moving to stand behind her. "Whatever you need." She turned to look at him one last time, her eyes bright with unshed tears. "If this kills me, promise me you'll tell the galaxy what really happened to my people. Promise me their story won't die with me." "You're not going to die," he said firmly, placing his hands on her shoulders. The contact sent electricity racing through his nerves, and he felt the vast power contained within her fragile form. "I won't let you." Lirelai closed her eyes and began to sing. It wasn't music in any conventional sense. The sound seemed to bypass the ears entirely, resonating in the bones, in the spaces between thoughts, in the quantum foam that underlied reality itself. Zephyr felt it building, layer upon layer of harmonic complexity that made the damaged bridge shimmer and blur at the edges. The ship's systems responded to her voice like instruments in some cosmic orchestra. Power flows rerouted themselves in patterns that defied engineering logic. The communication array blazed with energy that should have overloaded every circuit, broadcasting her song across the void in a focused beam of pure sonic force. Echo's voice joined the symphony, the AI's consciousness somehow harmonizing with Lirelai's song. "Resonance cascade initiated," the artificial being whispered, its usual wind chime tones transformed into something profound and strange. Quantum field fluctuations detected. Reality matrix destabilizing. When the song reached the bounty hunters' ships, the effect was immediate and terrifying. The lead vessel simply stopped, its engines going dark as if someone had thrown a master switch. Its weapon systems powered down, life support cycled to minimum, and the ship began to drift like a dead thing in space. The other two ships suffered similar fates, their pilots apparently struggling with controls that no longer responded to their commands. Through the chaos, Captain Voss's voice crackled over the comm, distorted and strange. What are you doing to us? My systems. I can't think straight. Lyrelai's song reached a crescendo that made the stars themselves seem to pulse in rhythm. Then, as suddenly as it had begun, the music stopped. She swayed on her feet, her markings flickering like dying stars, trails of luminescent tears streaming down her cheeks. What did you do? Zephyr breathed, catching her as she began to collapse. Sang them to sleep, she whispered, her voice barely audible. Their ship systems, their cybernetic implants, even their neural activity, everything has a frequency. I found theirs and adjusted it. They'll wake in a few hours with no memory of the last day. She collapsed then, the effort having drained her completely. Zephyr caught her before she hit the deck, cradling her against his chest as her breathing came in shallow gasps. Her skin was cold now. The luminescence faded to barely perceptible flickers. Are they dead? He asked, looking out at the drifting ships. Sleeping, she managed, her hand finding his face with trembling fingers. But Zephyr, using the resonance like that, it leaves traces in the quantum field. They'll know what I am now, what I'm capable of. There will be others. Many others. He held her closer, feeling the subtle vibration that always accompanied her touch. Weaker now, but still present. Then we keep running. For how long? I won't spend my life hiding, and I won't let you sacrifice yours for mine. Her eyes met his, and despite her exhaustion, he saw determination burning there like banked coals. There's something I need to tell you about why they really want me and what happened to my people. Later, he said, lifting her carefully in his arms. She weighed almost nothing, as if the effort of using her abilities had burned away part of her substance. Right now you need rest. But as he carried her toward the medical bay, Lyrelai's words echoed in his mind. He'd saved her from the slave market, thinking she was simply the last of her people, a living artifact to be protected and cherished. Now he was beginning to suspect that Nyx, Lyrelai, was something far more significant and far more dangerous. In the medical bay, he settled her onto the treatment table and activated the ship's medical scanners. The readings were unlike anything he'd ever seen, her vital signs fluctuating in patterns that seemed to match some cosmic rhythm. As she drifted toward healing sleep, her lips moved and whispered Atlantaran. Zephyr leaned close, trying to catch the words. What he heard made his heart stop. She wasn't just reciting poetry or prayers. She was speaking in technical terms, describing quantum field manipulation techniques that were centuries ahead of current galactic science. Her people hadn't just been able to sing to the stars. They had understood the fundamental forces of reality in ways that modern civilization couldn't even comprehend. Echo, he called softly to the ship's AI. Did you record what just happened? Affirmative, came the melodious reply. However, I must warn you, Zephyr. The quantum resonance patterns she generated are unlike anything in my databases. If the hegemony analyzes the traces we left behind, they'll know exactly what they're hunting, Zephyr finished grimly. He looked down at Lyrelai's sleeping form, her markings pulsing gently with the rhythm of her dreams. She wasn't just the last of her people. She was their living memory, their culture and knowledge encoded in the very structure of her consciousness. And somewhere in the dark spaces between stars, others were searching for her with resources that dwarfed anything a single bounty hunter could command. The hegemony wanted her not just for her abilities, but for the secrets of an entire civilization that could reshape the balance of power in the galaxy. Outside, the disabled bounty hunter ships drifted in the void, their crews locked in artificial slumber. But Zephyr knew this was just the beginning. Soon, there would be others, and they wouldn't be caught off guard by Lyralay's song. He stood in the quiet medical bay, watching over the woman who had already changed his life in ways he was only beginning to understand. 3 days ago, he had been a failed academic, running from his past and slowly dying inside. Now he was the guardian of knowledge that could transform the galaxy. The responsibility was terrifying. But as he watched Lyralay sleep, her face peaceful despite everything she had endured, Zephyr made a decision that would change both their lives forever. He wouldn't just help her run from the past. He would help her reclaim it. Her people's history, their knowledge, their songs that could touch the fundamental forces of reality itself. And then, together, they would decide what to do with the power to reshape the galaxy. The stars wheeled on in their ancient patterns, and somewhere in their cosmic song, the last echo of Atlantara began to grow stronger. In the depths of space, a forgotten princess was remembering who she truly was, and a lost scholar was discovering that some things were worth fighting for. The universe held its breath, waiting to see what two outcasts could accomplish when they refused to let hope die.